We're fortunate this afternoon to bring to you, through the assistance of the Internet Innovation Alliance, someone that I have become a fan of since the 2008 presidential election. Jamal Simmons is co-chair of the Internet Innovation Alliance. During the 2010 congressional election, he was a Democratic political analyst for CBS News, and before that, fixture on CNN during the 2008 election. Jamal got his professional start as into presidential politics, traveling with candidate Bill Clinton. During his successful 1992 campaign, was a political appointee during the first Clinton administration with U.S. Trade Representative and Commerce Secretary Willie Cannon. In 2000, he was a communications aide for Vice President Al Gore during his presidential campaign and served as Gore's spokesman in West Palm Beach, Florida during the recount. Jamal was an advisor to Nevada Democrats and the Democratic National Committee for the 2008 Obama-Biden campaign. This is where things get real special. He's a Morehouse man. I think the line goes that you can always tell a Morehouse man, but you can't tell him anything. Oh, that's a theme, At Morehouse, he recently received a presidential award of distinction, and he has a master's in public policy from Harvard University. His views and opinions have been featured in several major publications such as GQ Magazine, New York Times, and Politico. But as a sidebar, I would like to say when Mr. Bannister, whom we shortly, spoke to me about whom we might want IA to sponsor here and gave a list of choices, Jamal was at the top of the list. In my short 52 years on this earth, there are few young people that have impressed me with the intellect, but also the ability to communicate it in such a way that, as in the poem, to walk with kings but never lose the common touch. So, So I think you will be quite pleased in the words, wisdom, and the agenda, and ideas that will be shared to you shortly. Please give a warm South Carolina welcome to Jamal Simmons.
Well, good afternoon. For the record, I didn't ask them to put that there. And I appreciate all the applause from Morehouse, especially from the ladies. It's definitely a pleasure to be here. I think there's a state representative here, Ronald Brown. There he is. Thank you for being here. I also want to thank Deborah and I'm sorry, I got that wrong. Starting off with and Bernie, thank you very much for having me. It's always good to be back here in South Carolina. I spent a little bit of time here in 2003 when I was campaigning with Bob Graham and Wesley Clark during the presidential campaigns. And from Jim Clyburn's Fish Fry in Columbia to Good Food and PD, I had a really a special time and enjoyed the state. For those of us who follow politics for a living, South Carolina is really a place that helps determine our national politics. We saw, and people like me who follow politics the way many people follow football, we saw in 2000 in South Carolina that put George W. Bush back in the game after losing in New Hampshire, and in 2008 it was South Carolina that gave Barack Obama his bounce back after losing in New Hampshire and in Nevada. So this year you may not see many Democrats in the state because the president doesn't have a primary. But you're going to see a lot of Republican candidates, and South Carolina and Florida are two states that have the best track record of picking nominees in the Republican Party. So you are going to be having your fill of presidential politics on that side. But when the Democrats and the Republicans show up in this state, I want you to ask them some serious questions. South Carolina is now tied with my home state of Michigan for the third highest unemployment rate in the nation at 10.9%. African American unemployment in this country is over 16%. And despite a slight uptick in the last year, the Census Bureau still reports that median income in this state is down 6% from 2007. It's time for us to ask all the people who want to represent us, Republicans and Democrats, what are they going to do to put a shot in the arm of this economy and get our people back to work? We got to get them back to work, and we got to go for the future. I've worked in American politics now for almost 2 decades, and despite being called young by Bernie, I just had my 40th birthday about 2 months ago. I'm still getting used to saying that. I was in the gym this morning. You know how you get on the machine and they ask you to put the age in, and you keep pushing the number up. I was like, dang. So I'm getting used to that. Now we all know that. We all know that America still has some problems to overcome, especially when it comes to African Americans. African Americans make less money. We live sicker. We die younger than the general population. But despite those problems, we live in a country that is such a special place. And each generation before ours has taken on the challenges of their day to make the country an even better place. Our forefathers ended slavery and child labor. They left comfort and security of their homes, like my family in Georgia and Alabama and Virginia. They left their farms and families to head to cities and factories to harness the power of the Industrial Revolution and make a better lives for themselves and their families. They repeatedly put themselves at risk when called upon by our nation to fight. They fought for women's rights and marched in the streets to end segregation and legal discrimination. The result of their sacrifice is a nation that has continually provided more opportunity for more Americans generation after generation. There is more opportunity to succeed here in the United States than in any country on earth. And nobody knows that more than the people of South Carolina that gave a skinny kid from Chicago with a funny name a chance to be the first black president of the United States. But also America is special because in America we take to these new technological advances and they spur economic growth. From the cotton gin to the railroad, the steam engine, the telegraph, the telephone, the combustible engine, America has adapted new technologies to grow our economy. And today there is a new critical technology, high-speed internet service, broadband. Like the railroad of yesteryear, this infrastructure presents new chances for success and opportunity for our people, communities, and businesses. Access to high-speed broadband has become a necessity. It's not just a luxury. Running a business or even searching for a job without access to broadband now is almost impossible. Job seekers can use broadband to find opportunities, but workers or professionals in all fields can use it to seek additional training, professional education, development, and networking opportunities. For would-be entrepreneurs and small business owners, broadband is an important link to resources and organizations that can help new businesses succeed. In fact, businesses of all sizes must have access to wireless broadband in order to compete in the 21st century economy and within the global marketplace. There should be nothing that limits a business in Columbia, South Carolina from doing business in Chicago or the Czech Republic or anywhere else in the world. Broadband enhances new and existing businesses of all sizes. I'll tell you about two companies. The first one is one that I was a part of for about 3 years. We company had 4 partners. One was in Los Angeles, 2 of us were in Washington, D.C., and the 4th one, you may know him or his father, Donnie Fowler, Jr. Donnie is based in San Francisco with his wife and brand new baby daughter. Donnie and our other 3 partners, other 2 partners, we ran that company off of laptops, cell phones, a website, and plane tickets. Not a stitch of, not a brick and mortar building between us. But we traveled the country, we sold ourselves, sold our services, and we got customers, and we made a little bit of money. And the second company is a couple of friends of mine, Shane and Sean Ward from Detroit. They had a fancy shoe store in downtown New York City and decided to close that shoe store because they could make more money selling their shoes on the internet around the world than they could out of the store and paying rent in Manhattan. That is the world that it is that we're moving into. And there are young people out there that you and I know, and many of them that we don't, who are going to be able to use this technology to do things that we can't even imagine. I don't know how many of you people here had this experience, but we have these younger interns that come into our office every summer, and young people who come in as junior staff, and they just, they turn the place out. There's all kinds of stuff they figure out how to do what we're doing that we had no idea. And so giving them the access to be able to have their growth is incredibly important. And that access to broadband is a tool for educational success as well. It means that students can access educational enrichment and teachers can provide cutting-edge learning opportunities and homework and help online. Broadband allows rural students to access advanced course offerings that smaller schools don't usually have. And it allows students of all ages to take advantage of distance learning. A child in Greenville can study the Mona Lisa without ever having to get on a plane and go to Paris. They do the same research as any child anywhere else in the world. On a side note, I'm sure I'm in the room with a bunch of good church-going folks, despite the fact that we all ate before we had our invocation and our blessing. And I know nobody here ever attends Bedside Baptist or Our Lady of Sealy and Serta on a Sunday morning just because you're tired. You have to go to sick and shut in list. But for those of you who happen to miss church from time to time, you can now go to your church website or streamingfaith.com and get a message that you might not hear if you missed church in an earlier era. In every facet of our lives, this technology is having an impact. So success in community development hinges on economic and business growth, and access to broadband can be the deciding factor for both of those goals. Broadband can be a great equalizer, but only if everyone has equal access. And right now, that's just not the case. Currently, many regions and communities are underserved or unserved. That is, they lack access to high-speed broadband and all of its possibilities. There are haves and have-nots when it comes to broadband. There are those who have access to communications and information technologies and the ability to participate in our digital age, and there are those who simply do not. This is called the digital divide, but it could also be called the digital disadvantage. Lack of access to broadband is holding people and communities back, and they risk falling behind as the rest of the world moves forward at an incredibly increasing faster pace. Rural, minority, and low-income communities are disproportionately affected by a digital disadvantage. In 2010, the National Telecommunications and Information Administration found that half of all African Americans households did not connect to the internet using broadband. That's 37% less than white households. Additionally, studies by the SEC, NTIA, and the Free Internet and American Life Project all found that African American, Hispanic, and low-income households have the lowest broadband adoption by far. This is an important civil rights issue. Lack of broadband access means a lack of access to economic prosperity and future opportunities. These are the very demographic groups that stand to benefit the most from access to broadband and its power to encourage economic growth and promote education. With higher unemployment, these are the very communities that need access to opportunities and new possibilities. These are the very people broadband can assist in developing their own individual vision for success. It is the path to success for many business owners and entrepreneurs. So when we talk about economic development, we must be mindful that the digital divide is a major obstacle, one that must be overcome. In order to do that, public leaders and private businesses can work together to support policies and investments that result in broadband expansion. We heard the president recently. He mentioned the need to invest in the nation's infrastructure, to put all Americans back to work and invigorate local economies. With expanding broadband, we're not just talking about the infrastructure of the future, but also the infrastructure that connects us today and drives the economy. And here's the good news. Deployment of 4G LTE, the most advanced wireless broadband, will speed our economic recovery and create jobs as it simultaneously closes that digital divide and erases that disadvantage. A recently released study from Deloitte Consulting clearly shows that U.S. investment in 4G networks will boost our overall economic economy. How much? Well, the analysis showed that investment by the wireless industry over the next 5 years could be between $25 to $53 billion. That could account for as much as $73 to $150 billion in GDP growth. This investment would mean a more robust, reliable broadband infrastructure for everyone, as well as this impressive growth. But that's not the end of the good news. The study also found that the wireless companies' investments could account for 370 to 770,000 new jobs. And those are the conservative numbers, because that's just the investment in 4G. That's not everything else and all the ripple effects of what that investment will mean. Our next challenge, though, if we're going to create these jobs, our next challenge is to make sure our children have the ability to fill them. And that is part of the next challenge for America. Microsoft founder Bill Gates in 2008 spoke in front of the Senate, and he said, too many of our students fail to graduate from high school with the basic skills they would need to succeed in the 21st century economy, much less prepared for the rigors of college and career. Although our top universities continue to rank among the best in the world, too few American students are pursuing degrees in science and technology. Compounding this problem is our failure to provide sufficient training for those already in the workforce. These are the people who've been unemployed. The 14 million we were talking about a little while ago are going to have to be retrained to be able to take jobs that are going to come online in this economy. Gates talked about the millions of jobs expected to be created in the United States in science, technology, in engineering, and math fields, and the declining number of American students who are getting degrees in those fields. 15% fewer engineers coming out of U.S. colleges from 2000 to 2005. Americans need a pathway to prosperity, and investing in technology like broadband, fixing our education system, reducing our long-term deficit, and putting more people back to work so we can spur demand and increase growth would solve many of our problems. We all watch what's happening in Washington, D.C. It's a mess. 10 years ago, George Bush took us to war in Iraq with what he called the coalition of the willing. It's time today for us to have a coalition of the rational to take over our politics. We need to return to a reign of the responsible so we can fix the problems that we face, because we know what these problems are. We have solutions on the table to fix them if only people will come together and do their part. We need to get on that pathway to prosperity. I gotta tell you, I'm very fortunate I get to travel around a lot. And one of the things I love to do is wake up early in the morning and see a sunrise. It's a little cloudy this morning, but you wake up and you see the sunrise, and for me, it reminds me of all the possibility that every day has to offer. And I've been able to do this in southern Africa, in the mountains, and at the Sea of Galilee, where Jesus taught, and it's just a profoundly spiritual experience for me. One day I put a picture of a sunrise up on my Facebook page on the internet, and I got a funny response from a woman who said, "Wow, what a beautiful picture of a sunset." It was then that I realized that looking at a picture of the sun sitting on the horizon, you actually cannot tell the difference between whether or not it is going up or going down. The only way you know the difference is to have an understanding of what happened before that picture was taken and an expectation about what's going to happen in the moments after that picture was taken. When I think about where we are as a country, I see America like that sun sitting just at the horizon. The difference between where we are as a country and what happens with the sun is that God tells the sun what to do. The sun doesn't have a choice. God has given us free will. God has given us the ability to make choices in our lives about what direction it is we're going to head as a nation. And it is our job to embrace sunrise. It is our job to decide that we are going to have brighter days going forward than the days we had behind us. And it's going to take each and every one.
Are you challenged? Are you sufficiently motivated? Now, the most provocative part of what I thought of Jamal's comments is that image of the sun. And hearing him paint the picture prior to that of the importance of access to technology in all of our communities is a choice that we can make, whether to fight to bring that access or to stay in mediocrity. So I want to thank you for challenging us here in South Carolina to not remain in mediocrity, but to determine whether we are a state on the ascent or descent. The participants here heard earlier this morning of a tradition we have for all of our keynote speakers, that we present you a token and a representation of South Carolina. And in your midst in many travels, we hope that this will be a reminder of your opportunity to see the sunrise this morning in the Carolinas, in South Carolina. We have gifted persons in South Carolina, and many of you who are here this morning already saw this image. Artist John Jones painted an image of the King Hoy Peninsula in Berkeley County. And the images of a shrimper casting his net. To some, this is a step back in time, a step back into simplicity. But the fact of the shrimper casting his net is also a glance into the future. An opportunity for us to reap the rewards of our own assets and resources and share that with those that are with us. So we hope
the South Carolina Association of Community Development Corporations recently held their two-day conference in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. At the top of their agenda was the need for expansion of broadband into rural South Carolina and the underserved minority communities. I spoke with the association's president and CEO, Bernie Mizik, about the conference's focus.
CDCs traditionally, for most of us, relate to housing development or community development in a sense. Where does broadband come down in that big picture of community development?
Well, it's a good question. As more of our members see their communities somewhat isolated from the mainstream of information, becomes necessary so that these communities can be connected to the larger world. Usually folk that are in low to moderate income communities, they often don't have access to the training materials and the educational materials that are available to, say, folk in the urban areas or communities that are more affluent. And so broadband, the access to broadband will help create access to information, access to resources. We know that the banking system is largely going to be going to a paperless system. It's all going to be based on the computer. It's going to be based on managing your finances over the internet. Same thing with medicine. Telemedicine is going to become a big thing where folk are going to be able to track their health records through the internet. So we in the community development arena see the need to develop communities with broadband already integrated into the planning process. And it's not where we need to catch up, it's where we need to stay ahead and think about that on the front end. So that as our CDCs are building and rehabbing homes, we need to start talking to those homeowners and home buyers about having access to the internet, access to broadband, and then make sure we can provide that to those communities.
Okay, you're speaking about improving infrastructure, say for instance in some of these rural communities, the expense that goes into owning a computer or that kind of thing, and most of these folks can't. So where are these folks, say for instance this community we just passed through, Horry County on the outlay, okay, we get some money for broadband, where are these people going to actually access? What's going to be the point of access for them to get to broadband?
Well, we're going to have to be working with providers like AT&T, like T-Mobile, like Verizon, to make sure that they are putting the infrastructure in place in these communities. That's where some advocacy takes place. That's where networking on our part and with IIA to make sure that those providers are providing the infrastructure into these communities. It's about advocacy. We've got to help them realize, because yes, we're saying because of the T-Mobile AT&T potential merger that that's going to create access, but not unless we are affirmative about it, unless we are in their face saying we really need you to provide that access to these communities, to Allendale, to Marlboro, to Bennettsville and other rural and isolated communities. So that's going to take advocacy on the part of IIA, the state association, our member CDCs, to interact with these providers to make sure that the infrastructure is there.
The keynote speaker for the conference was Jamal Simmons of the Rabin Group. Jamal is currently the national co-chair for the Internet Innovation Alliance. Jamal had served as a political analyst during the 2008 election campaign for CNN and in 2010 for CBS. I asked Jamal what was the principal mission of the IIA.
The mission of the Internet Innovation Alliance is to expand broadband service and reliability to underserved and unserved communities. Many of those people are in urban areas and they're in rural areas. So in urban areas, a big part of the problem is having reliable service that's always there, always functioning, works like it's supposed to. And in rural areas, a big part of the problem is that they don't actually even have the highest speed service to choose from. So we want to make sure that everybody has the same access to reliable broadband service wherever they are, whoever they are, and wherever they are. So the Internet Innovation Alliance is focused on expanding broadband service to unserved and underserved communities, rural and urban, regardless of race or background. And we think it's going to have a big impact on people in South Carolina because we're focused on changing policies at the federal level that will impact people, particularly in rural communities who don't have access to the highest speed wireless broadband. So that means we want to look at three things. We want to get the Universal Service Fund to go not just for using to expand voice service, but also to expand broadband service. We want to do reallocation of the spectrum so that people can take the spectrum that is currently sitting fallow, not being used, and use it more efficiently so that we can get a higher quality spectrum to be able to use in many communities. And then we've been focused on, one of our members is AT&T. We've been focused on their AT&T T-Mobile deal because we think that deal is going to get you to about 97% of the country under broadband service, about 55 million more Americans. AT&T is committed to spending about $8 billion in infrastructure expansion, which will go to also increasing employment and jobs around the country. So we think those three kind of things will make sense. And I'm giving you a long answer, but I'm going to tell you three more things that we want to pay attention to, how it will impact people. It will impact people on telemedicine, meaning that if you're in Greenville, you're going to be able to communicate with a physician in Charlotte or in Columbia or in New York City who can help diagnose you. Your doctor can share test results, can share x-rays, and you get second opinions, all sorts of things. So telemedicine, we look at educational opportunities, students who have access to all the best educational opportunities around the world. And then we look at the third thing is economic development. And we think people, particularly entrepreneurs and small businesses, will be able to use all the tools that are available through the internet to be able to have more efficient businesses and be able to go into business without having to go through all the upfront costs most people do.
For additional information, log on to the website internetinnovation.org.